Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, CFL edition, Wednesday, July 31st. I have to start saying it, CFL edition of the Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy show moving forward, because we are getting closer to the NFL and college football season. And once we get into late August, college football will become a weekly show here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Once we get into September, the NFL is going to become a weekly show, its own show here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. So this is going to be a first time ever. And I've been doing the Football Frenzy show now for probably 4 years, maybe even 5. For the first time ever, this show this season is going to have a dedicated CFL show weekly, a dedicated NFL show weekly, and a dedicated college football show weekly. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be time consuming. I get that, but we're here to provide great content and great betting analysis for all the viewers and people subscribe to the channel. So we're very much looking forward to that once NFL and college football get here. Of course, this is CFL Week 9 coming up, and that is what we are here to discuss on this show. And of course, we're almost, believe it or not, getting closer and closer to the halfway point of the season. No question. So as we always do, and by the way, fresh off a best bet winner, probably the ugliest best bet winner maybe in the history of this show in the CFL with the Toronto Argonauts last week. I am not going to say they were the right side. They got outgained by 200 yards, 5-1 turnover difference, 5 turnovers for Winnipeg. 1 for Toronto. So Toronto was +4 turnover margin. Look, Toronto needed every bounce to go their way. Winnipeg was just moving the ball and just not finishing drives, turning the football over. Winnipeg deserved to win that game, should have won that game, but I'll take it with the Toronto Argonauts with the best bet cashing last week on the Week 8 edition of the show. Let's move ahead now to Week 9. And as we always do on this show, we will begin with the team, talking about the team that's on the bye this week. And the team that's on the bye week this week is probably right there with Saskatchewan as the two, turnaround season stories so far in the 2024 CFL season. We know Saskatchewan, obviously disappointing year last year. They're 5-2, and they have certainly turned things around and played some great football. Well, this team on the bye week this week is doing the same, and I don't think they're getting talked about nearly as much as, in fact, I know they're not getting talked about as much as Saskatchewan, and that's the 5-2 Ottawa Red Blacks, who are on the bye week this week, coming off just a tremendous, dominant blowout victory over the Calgary Stampeders last week on their home field, a home field that, for years has been anything but feeling like home for this franchise, but they've struggled there. They've played maybe some of their worst games at home. The last few years, I think Ottawa's probably played worse at home than they have on the road. But this year, they're now 4-0 at home after that 33-6 beatdown over the Calgary Stampeders. It was just very impressive in all phases. And I think that is what is eye-opening about the way the Red Blacks are playing. They're doing it on offense with Drew Brown, who continues to look more comfortable, more proficient, throwing the football with every passing game, which is definitely helping this Ottawa team as far as success is concerned. He's been very good, accurate in the pocket. He's starting to limit mistakes, not make as many as maybe he did early in the season. He's going to make an odd bad decision every now and then. But again, nice to see, even though he only had 1 touchdown pass, 30 for 37, 7 incomplete passes on 37 pass attempts, 325 passing yards, and again, no interceptions. And for a guy that's in his first full season as a starting quarterback in the CFL, that's probably the stat you like to see the most, that he's not turning the ball over, not putting his team in a difficult position. So, yeah, nothing but good things to say about the way Drew Brown is playing right now for the Ottawa Red Blacks. They've certainly got more weapon. The offensive line has certainly played better. They've blocked well. They've protected for Drew Brown better than they have in the past. They've got more weapons and playmakers, I think, than they've had in recent years. When you look at Jalen Acklin, who's been here for years, but what they've added with him. Justin Hardy's been great. Dominique Rhymes has been great. Braylon Addison, finally healthy. showing what he's capable of. And then Khalil Pimpleton, who's just been a revelation here these last couple of games that he's gotten into the lineup on offense and been a dynamic kick returner on special teams for this Ottawa Red Blacks team as well. 80 receiving yards for him last week. Pimpleton with another good kick return last week as well on special teams. Dominant effort in that win over Calgary last week. Over 400 yards of offense. They completely got after it on defense, made Jake Mayer's life miserable. Only 136 passing yards for Jake Mayer in the loss. Ottawa's defense was suffocating. You look at what they were able to do on that side of the football. 3 sacks on Jake Mayer, James Vaughters, Mike Rose, Julian Hauser recording those sacks. Lorenzo Malden did not have any sacks, but he had a lot of pressure. He was right in the face of Mayer, it felt like, all night. It was just a dominant win for Ottawa, complete effort, all 3 phases. And now this team enters the bye week, 5-2 in second place in the East. And because, Montreal, has some question marks about the health of Cody Fajardo moving forward, although we'll get to that in the Montreal-Hamilton game. It's looking like Cody might be making a return this week, which we'll get to in a moment. But suddenly Ottawa's only 1 game back of the Montreal Alouettes for first in the East. Montreal 6-1, Ottawa 5-2. So now I've been very impressed. There were a lot of people, after last season, very unhappy with the coaching job of Bob Dice, getting a lot of heat. And people saying, you know what, he's a nice guy. I know the players like him, but he can't coach worth a hill of beans. You could do better at the coaching position. And Ottawa, even with that criticism being directed from the fan base toward Bob Dice, that he doesn't adjust in game enough, that he makes some questionable decisions, bad challenges. I mean, we were hearing a bunch of different criticisms and negative commentary regarding Bob Dice and whether he was the right guy to be the head coach of this Ottawa team. But Sean Burke, the GM, was steadfast, saying, you know what, I know it wasn't the year we hoped, but we believe in Bob Dice. We're going to give him another chance here as far as being the head coach of this team going into the 2024 season. And you look at the way it started, it's really great to see for him, because from all accounts, this is a phenomenal human being. He's a great man. He is a player's coach. They want to do well for him. They want to play well for him. No one says a bad word about Bob Dice, the man. But people were, questioning his coaching a little bit last year. So it's great to see the team having success for him, and Bob Dice having success right now with this great 5-2 start for the Ottawa Red Blacks. All right, let's turn our attention now to week 9 in the CFL. Once again, we've got a game Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. I love this schedule, the way it is for the CFL until the NFL season starts, where we get 1 game per night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We begin with Thursday night football, and it is the BC Lions taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. BC 4-point road favorites, 50 the total. BC off the bye week and a loss. So you've got a good team, and we know BC's a good team, off a loss before the bye week when they lost to Calgary, and they're off a bye. That's usually a good bet on situation. Good team, not only off a loss, but also off a bye week. And Winnipeg, look, I get it. Winnipeg's been right there. Winnipeg's had chances to win games. And now, for the first time in a very long time, Winnipeg is a home underdog. We have just not seen that very much. I don't even think we've seen it this year. Winnipeg be a home underdog. Against Montreal, they were a 7.5-point favorite first game of the season. They were still favored against BC back on June 21st. They were 2.5-point home favorites. They lost 26-24. They were 3-point home favorites against Ottawa, and they were 6-point home favorites against Calgary. So this is indeed the first time this season, and it's probably the first time it's got to be the first time in years, because we're talking about a team that prior to this season, they won the West 4 straight years, got to the Grey Cup 4 straight years. It's got to be years since they've been a home underdog. And here we are for the first time that I can remember. Winnipeg on their home field is a home underdog. in this game. It is worth noting with Winnipeg this year at home, just 1-3 against the spread coming into this game in their 4 home games, even though they're 2-2 straight up. 1-7 against the spread for the season, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers coming into this game. Look, last week's 16-14 loss for Winnipeg and Toronto, Kolarov wasn't that bad. 317 yards. He moved the football. Only 7 incomplete passes. He did have the 1 interception, but he's got his receivers to blame. I mean, you can't lose the fumbles that they all let. Even Brady Oliveira let him down with a key fumble. But Drew Olatarski loses a ball that he caught. Nick Dembski, that's 2 weeks in a row, Nick Dembski, a critical fumble. It happened to him against Saskatchewan as well the week before when they lost to the Riders. So, you just cannot commit 5 turnovers and expect to win the game. And so this is the conundrum with Winnipeg. Winnipeg's playing well enough to win statistically, but the eye test says, they're not finding ways to win, that there are holes with this team, that they're turning the ball over way too much, that Zach Collaros has lost some of the zip and the arm strength that he had even just a year or two ago, that the offensive line's not blocking and protecting as consistently, that the defense is not making the stops when they need to. When they needed to make stops against Toronto last week, they didn't. And I know Toronto's offense struggled for most of that game, but at the end of the game, when they needed to put points on the board, Toronto did. So there's still all kinds of issues. Mike O'Shea, what the hell was he thinking last week? You got to kick that field goal. Knowing how badly Toronto's offense struggled that whole game, and it didn't matter whether it was Cameron Dukes or Nick Arbuckle at quarterback. It really didn't. That Toronto offense, it didn't feel like they were going to matriculate the football down the field. Even if Winnipeg had kicked that field goal, I did not feel confident in Toronto going down the field and at least tying the game. But he went for it on 4th down. They got stopped short. The spot was dubious. You could argue that it wasn't a great spot either with that 3rd down play. But the fact remains, you look at that situation during the football game, he has to kick that field goal. He has to put Sergio Castillo out there to kick that field goal, but he did not do that. And it ended up coming back to haunt him, but just a brutal loss for Winnipeg. Brutal, because that's not a game they should have lost. Toronto did nothing on offense for most of that game, and somehow they lost that game, and outgaining Toronto as well by a sizable margin. What were the total yards in that game? 432 for Winnipeg and 210 or 220 for the Toronto Argonauts. 17-12 first downs in favor of the Blue Bombers. Like, how did they lose that game? That's the issue with them, and it's been the issue all year. They're not finding ways to win. But here's the thing now. Now they're getting 4 points at home. And, with some of Winnipeg's losses, they lost to Ottawa by only 4. They lost to Calgary by only 3. They lost to Toronto by 2 last week. So a lot of their losses, they've been these close, tight margins of 4 points or less. So, you're not getting a bargain with BC, but I still feel BC wins this game. What I did early in the week was I laid a -180 on the money line with BC, and I don't like doing that. I don't love long-term laying prices like that. I just don't. But I felt very, very confident here BC will win the game. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 3 or 4 point BC win, that it's a close game, much like it was actually, June 21st when these teams played here in Winnipeg, and it was 26-24 in favor of BC. So I opted for the BC Lions on the money line early in the week around -180. I just think they're still the better of these two teams. You've got a BC team that's going to have focus coming off not only a bye week, extra time to prepare, but a loss as well, against the Calgary Stampeders before the bye week. You've got Winnipeg playing in the East Saturday in Toronto, playing on a Thursday now. Very short week for the Bombers. Saturday to Thursday turnaround. That's not a bet-on situation. That's not a positive for the Bombers going into this game. And when you look at the bye week and what it's done for this Lions team, it's gotten them probably as healthy as they've been in a very long time. And especially, look, they've got great weapons. We know that with Alexander Hollins, you know, Justin McGinnis. The receiving core is fine, and I said that even coming into the season. Don't worry about Whitehead and Rhymes being gone. This team is still well stocked at receiver. But one guy they have not had all season is Keon Hatcher. And Keon Hatcher is finally off the 6-game the injury list with that Achilles issue. And he is back, and he will make his season debut here in Winnipeg on Thursday night. That's all BC needs, is just another weapon for Vernon Adams to have to throw the football to. So that's another plus here for BC, that now Keon Hatcher will be back. He's an excellent receiver, and you put him now with Hollins and McGinnis, and there's some other receivers for BC that slowly but surely are starting to become a bigger factor as well and step up for them in the passing game. I know, obviously, McGinnis and Hollins get the headlines, but look at the way Stanley Berryhill has started to step up. Look at the way Aiden Eberhardt has started to step up for them. I mean, and now you're going to put Keon Hatcher with that group. I mean, that's just it's a loaded receiving core again this year for the Lions, and now they're going to get stronger with the return of Keon Hatcher this coming week. When you look at Winnipeg as well, and you look at their overall team numbers, they actually haven't been as bad in the secondary as I thought they would be. They're second in the CFL as far as passing yards per game. You know, they've actually been worse against the run, 116.9 rushing yards per game, but the Lions haven't been great at running the football with Stanback, and they haven't always committed to running the football. So, you know, from a matchup standpoint, you know, maybe Winnipeg, whose secondary has slowly started to improve, and I say slowly started to improve. I think that second in the CFL ranking for their pass defense, I think it's a little skewed. Let's not forget Jake Mayer on this very field in Winnipeg, and I can't get this out of my head, and it's probably why I still think the BC passing attack can do some damage in this game. I can't get over the fact Jake Mayer threw for 316 passing yards and 2 touchdowns against this defense a few weeks ago and put up 37 points. They lost that game 41-37, Calgary, but you know, if Jake Mayer is doing that, what is Vernon Adams going to do with now a loaded receiving core against off a bye week, extra time to prepare against this Winnipeg defense? And by the way, too, you've got not just good, you've got elite coordinators on this BC Lions team. Jordan Maksimic is going to be a future head coach in the CFL. There's no question. He's that good as far as an offensive coordinator for the BC Lions. Ryan Phillips is going to be a future head coach in the CFL as the defensive coordinator. I mean, Rick Campbell has 2 phenomenal coordinators on his coaching staff, and they will be future CFL head coaches. So this is a damn good coaching staff. You give this staff this kind of a quality, strong, elite coaching staff, the bye week and the time to prepare, I got to believe BC comes out here, especially after the frustrating loss where they just weren't in sync. They weren't sharp against Calgary. I think they come out here, they get the job done. But I am playing it safer. A few days ago, I took -180 on the money line with the BC Lions. -4, I'd be careful, but I don't trust Winnipeg enough. The only concern I would have with where the number is now at 4 is that Winnipeg has played quite a few close games, and maybe this is another one. And BC did only beat them by 2 in Winnipeg back in June, but I would still lean BC -4. I just felt I feel better about just asking them to win the game, which is what I took. As far as the total goes, BC's an over team to me. Winnipeg's an under team, so I'm passing on the total. And look, the total is 50 in this game. The final score of the earlier meeting this year between these teams in Winnipeg was 26-24, exactly 50 points. So the total to me is bang on. It's spot on where it should be. BC's kind of an over team in my opinion, and Winnipeg has been nothing but an under team. And I don't know if I have the guts, even with the explosiveness BC has, to take a Winnipeg game over the total at 50 when they're 7-1 to the under this season. So it would be a difficult ask for me to take a Winnipeg game over the total. But BC to me is an over team. So that's why with the total for me, it's tricky. It's probably a total I'm going to stay off when it's all said and done. All right, Friday night football tonight. The next game, and I'll be there at what potentially, and look, I've said this a lot to people over the years. I can count on one hand how many games I've been to as a Hamilton Ticat season ticket holder. I can count on one hand over the last 10 years how many rain games we've had. How many games where we've had bad weather? How many games where we've had rain? And not just I'm talking a little sprinkle. I'm talking about a heavy rain. Like maybe once or twice it's happened the last 10 years. Like normally for the Ticat home games, we get immaculate weather. But Friday night, there is a chance of thunderstorms, possibly severe thunderstorms for this game. So it is something to keep an eye on as we get closer to kickoff. And again, the game is still a couple days away, but something to just keep an eye on as we get closer to game day on Friday. But it's a big one now for the Ticats after getting their first 2 wins of the season. And now you're playing a team that you're trying to catch, a big divisional game. The first place Montreal Alouettes roll in to Steeltown. Montreal 5-point road favorites, 50.5 the total. I shouldn't call it the Steel Town anymore because we don't have many steel mills anymore, not like 30, 40 years ago. It's the Hammer now. That's why they call it that instead, which I like that nickname. So what do we make of Hamilton, right? They'd have 1-2 in a row. It looks like they're putting the pieces back together of looking like a competent CFL team. But they beat an Argos team that's struggling and starting to flounder. They beat an Edmonton team that can't get out of their own way. This is most assuredly a step up in class for Hamilton. Oh, and you're on a short turnaround in a short week. Sunday in Edmonton and now Friday night here back home in Hamilton. That's not easy. That's a negative situation. This is the exact situation Calgary was in last week, where they played BC at home on a Sunday night. They had to go east to play Ottawa on a Friday, and they got their doors blown off. They got absolutely shit kicked in that game, hammered by the Ottawa Red Blacks. So I'm worried about the spot here for Hamilton coming off that win against the Edmonton Elks on Sunday. And that's a big step up in class. Let's not kid ourselves. It's a much better football team they're playing here in this game. Now, early in the week, and even as probably right after the Saskatchewan win last week for Montreal, my thinking was Cody Fajardo being put on the 6-game injured list means he's going to be out at least a month. Now, all of a sudden, they've taken him off the injured list yesterday, and he was back at practice. So I don't know if that means for sure he's playing, but man, it sure looks like it to me. So this is definitely a faster than expected return from this injury for Cody Fajardo, and he might be back starting at quarterback here for the Alouettes in this game. So we might not see Davis Alexander, who absolutely wowed everybody last week in the second half with his performance and rallying the Alouettes to a stirring comeback victory over the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He was just terrific. Absolutely, you can't deny it. He was making plays on the run. He was showing some mobility. He was very accurate. For a guy coming in cold off the bench, replacing obviously an ineffective Caleb Evans, and it was a move that turned out to be the right one by Jason Moss. Just an phenomenal performance by Davis Alexander. But if Cody's healthy, Cody's playing. Simple as that. And now that he's back at practice, it does make me think that we might see Cody Fajardo here back at quarterback. Although they did say he was limited in practice yesterday. So, again, we're recording this on a Wednesday. Let's see how active he is in practice today. Obviously, we'll know a lot more tomorrow when the depth charts get posted for this game. But there is definitely, at the very least, a possibility Cody Fajardo's back for Montreal. And they have been starting to remember, they were dealing with a lot of injuries. But Tyler Sneed, he practiced Monday. He did not practice yesterday. He still might be at least a week away from being ready to return. Cole Speaker's fine. He was back at practice, but there was some concerns about him. But they're finally getting healthier too, Montreal, which is a good thing. You look at the Ticats. Again, they're still without Stavros Katsantonis, one of their best players on the D-line. Joel Figueroa, though, here's a guy that has been, he's an older O-lineman, but when he is on the field, he's still very good. But he's just been injury prone. It looks like he was at practice, so he might be back, and it could stabilize and at least upgrade the O-line a little bit for Hamilton. Although the O-line played great last week. Maybe it's a product of how shitty the Edmonton defense is, but probably as good as the offensive line has played all year. Bo had time to throw the football. Bo Levi Mitchell, James Butler had as good a day running the football as he's had all season. So you got to give credit to that Ticats offensive line last week and the way they played against the Edmonton Elks. But it's going to be a much taller order here in this game. This is just for me, it's a pass. I haven't made a bet on this game, and I don't know if I will. I don't trust Hamilton yet, especially now that they're playing a much better team. They're not playing a Toronto team that offensively has just totally gone south and an Edmonton team that's just pathetic. That's not Montreal now. You're going to be tested in this game. Make no mistake about it. And if you look at the recent meetings, Montreal's owned this team. They've now won 7 in a row against the Ticats. And many of them were margins of at least a touchdown. I think only 2 of the wins were by a field goal or less. So they really have had their way. The last 2 times they visited Tim Hortons Field, both of them last year, 38-12 Montreal, 27-14 Montreal. So I honestly would lean Montreal here. It's just, to me, a tough ask for Hamilton here on a short week. But I'm waiting to see if Cody plays. And I'm waiting. Part of me is also saying, look, do I leave the door open that maybe Hamilton is really going to get on a run here and just really turn into a good football team? I'm not there yet. But if they beat Montreal this week, it's certainly going to pump way more confidence into the fan base, and it's going to pump way more confidence, I think, into the team themselves. Big game for Hamilton. And by the way, this is the front end of a home and home between these two teams. They play each other for a Friday night in Hamilton, and then next weekend they are back at it on Saturday night in Montreal. So these are 2 big-time football games for the Hamilton Tiger Cats here against the Montreal Alouettes. I don't think they're winning both. Hell, they made. I think it'll be I think it won't be easy for Hamilton to win one of the 2, let alone both. But let's say they win both. Suddenly they're 4-5, and Montreal's 6-3, and suddenly they're 2 games back, and they've got the tiebreaker because they've beaten Montreal twice head-to-head this season. So if they were to be tied at the end of the regular season, Hamilton would get the nod because they have the season series tiebreaker. So it's a big opportunity here for the Ticats to really, truly make people believe that they can make something of this season. I'm not there yet at 2-5 with that thinking and that thought process and that belief that they've made something of their season at this point. You beat Toronto and you almost coughed it up. Toronto made a shit ton of mistakes too and turnovers, and Edmonton stinks. Those are your 2 wins. Let me see what you do on Friday night. That's where I'm at with them right now. So, but it's a tough spot. It's a Sunday to Friday turnaround. I lean Montreal. The total is tricky because Montreal's an under team. Hamilton's an over team. Just like I talked about with the last game. You've got a BC Winnipeg. I want to bet BC over, but I want to bet Winnipeg under. This game, I kind of want to bet Montreal under, and I want to bet Hamilton over. So I don't know if I like the total enough to bet it. Simple as that. All right, Saturday night, Edmonton Elks, Saskatchewan Roughriders. Finally, the Trey Ford era begins. Well, at least for now it does. We thought it began last year, and then numbnuts. Football team. Yeah, we got a pretty good football team. Yeah, they're doing a pretty good job down there. Chris Jones, numbnuts that he is, decided, you know what? Trey Ford gave us most of our wins last year. He played very well down the stretch, pumped some life into the franchise and the season. But no, we're not going to make you the starting quarterback. We're going to go out there and get McLeod Bethel-Thompson and bring him in. And Trey Ford's going to have to sit behind him. So we thought the Trey Ford era got going last year. And then they bring in McLeod Bethel-Thompson. 7 losses later. And now finally, Trey Ford is back at QB1 as the starting quarterback for the Edmonton Elks. His first start of the season this Saturday night against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Saskatchewan 5.5-point home favorites, 51 the total. So Saskatchewan loses to Montreal last Thursday. Off a loss, back home. Definitely situationally, good situation for Saskatchewan. No doubt. No doubt about it. Good team, good coach, Corey Mace. Off a loss where they had a big lead at halftime, but the Davis Alexander show got them. And then Shea Patterson and the offense bogged down in the second half of that game, and they ended up losing 20-16. But now a chance to bounce back here against an Edmonton team that, in theory, they should beat them. They're 0-7. They haven't been very good. And Saskatchewan already beat Edmonton once earlier this year, 29-21, the very first game of the season. in Edmonton. However, let me draw your attention to September 15th of last year in Saskatchewan. Edmonton, underdogs against this Riders team. And I know Saskatchewan at the time had Jake Dolegala at quarterback for them, and Trevor Harris was injured. But Trey Ford started that game September 15th in Saskatchewan for the Edmonton Elks, and he led them to a very, very impressive 36-27 victory over the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And look, I get it that part of the reason he looked so great at the end of the game against Hamilton last week when he finally replaced McLeod Bethel Thompson is that Hamilton was playing prevent defense. They had a huge lead. They took their foot off the gas pedal. All of that led to, I think Trey Ford lighting it up like he did was a part of why Trey Ford lit it up. He also made some phenomenal plays. Nobody can spin around in the pocket, evade pressure, evade sacks, and then, twist his hips and fire it downfield and, improvise and find an open receiver. And he's just almost a magician, at being able to do that. But now, Saskatchewan's going to know he's starting. You've got a defense that to me is getting better by the week. The secondary is still a little shaky for them, Saskatchewan, but no, they're getting better by the week. And you expected that with a defensive-minded head coach, Corey Mace at the helm. Let's see what Trey Ford can do here on the road against a good team coming off a loss and a team that's going to be able to game plan and devise a game plan to shut him down and take away his strengths. But at the same point in time, he's such a gifted athlete, Trey Ford. We saw what happened for Edmonton when he took over as the starting quarterback last year. They started to string some wins together. And you saw just the energy and the adrenaline that started to just pulsate through that Edmonton Elks team and the sideline when he got into the game and he started making some throws and, getting those touchdown drives late in the loss to Hamilton last week. It's like a dormant, dead team. Look, they looked dead for 3 quarters. Dead. Because the defense stunk. And that's the big concern I have still, is their defense is just atrocious. Bo Levi Mitchell probably had his best game as a Ticat last week against that defense. And Bo Levi Mitchell, just in case you're wondering, hasn't had many good games as a Ticat. So that's what makes that defensive performance look terrible. But then Trey Ford enters the game finally, too little too late in the fourth quarter, but finally Jarius Jackson puts him in. And you just saw the bench erupt, and all of a sudden there's new life, and players are enjoying and having fun, and they're making gestures at the camera, and smiling. None of that was going on when MBT sucked for 3 quarters in that game. And by the way, McLeod Bethel Thompson, let me hear how the CFL schedule makers caused you to suck once again. Let me hear that. I'm waiting for that press conference. But I digress. You look at Edmonton. Trey Ford made the whole team play better. And even the defense started to play a little bit better after he got into the game. I think it generated a spark last week. I think at least for 1 week it generates a spark this week. I know it's a winless team. It's a bad defense, and that's really what concerns me. But is Shea Patterson at the point in his career, and he is at home and he has played better at home. I will say that too about Shea Patterson. The Montreal second half on the road was rough last week. I don't think he played particularly great against BC on the road. But he played solid against Winnipeg at home. He played solid against Toronto at home in his first start. There's no question that, he's played a little better here on his home field. But maybe this is finally a week Edmonton's defense can, they're not going to shut Saskatchewan down. I'm at the point with Edmonton's defense. Like, how about for a change you keep a team to like 20, 24 points instead of always giving up 30 and 31 and 37 and 39 and 44 like you've done so many times this year. That's what I'm going to ask them to do. And look, I think this Edmonton playbook will expand and open up. And I think Trey Ford's just athleticism and his ability to improvise and make plays happen when the pocket collapses, I think it's got the chance to open things up. It could open up the run game for Kevin Brown finally. They've still got great receivers when you talk about Dylan Mitchell and you talk about Hergy Mayala. And maybe this gets Geno Lewis going as well, who's had a tough season, very un-Geno Lewis-like season for the Edmonton Elks. There's still some good skill position weapons. Javon Leake, they started to use him in the offense last week as well. Curly Gittens Jr. So there's definitely some talent on this offense. And maybe Trey Ford's the quarterback to unlock some of that talent. So, yeah, I'm going to take the points here with Edmonton. This was just something I knew I was going to do. That if they confirmed that Trey Ford was going to be the quarterback, I said I'm going to end up landing on Edmonton here plus the points in this game. At plus 5.5, it's kind of in that no man's land. And this is a total I like the over. I do. Saskatchewan has gone under in 2 straight. And remember, they had that 15-1 over streak in their last 16 games prior to the last 2 games, which have both stayed under the total. The Winnipeg game 2 weeks ago and the Montreal game last week both stayed under the total. But this, to me, sets up like it could be a bit of a shootout. I think Shea Patterson, as long as he takes what the defense gives him, and Edmonton's defense is very giving. It gives you a lot. He should be able to move the football here. He should be able to get Saskatchewan to 24, 28 points minimum in this game, especially with it being at home at Mosaic. But I think Edmonton can put up some points too. I know Saskatchewan's defense is getting better, but getting pressure has been a big part of the success for Saskatchewan. But Trey Ford's got that ability with his running ability, and again, to break out of the pocket and be accurate on the run. Here's, believe it or not, the issue I have with Trey Ford. There is one flaw he has. As a stationary pocket passer, if you keep him in the pocket, I find sometimes in that scenario, his accuracy kind of dips, believe it or not. I find more often than not, Trey Ford's even more accurate throwing on the run as opposed to being stationary in the pocket. So that's going to be interesting to see if Saskatchewan can kind of keep him in the pocket, not let him break contain. And I think if they're able to do that, they're going to set themselves up for a better chance for success. But I don't think they're going to be able to do it completely. And we have evidence last year. Now, again, I will say that's a much worse Saskatchewan team. The season was falling apart. They lost. They had that losing streak down the stretch. Craig Dickinson wasn't coaching very well. And yes, Edmonton lit him up, but there's a better Saskatchewan team that he's going to have to try to light up here. But nevertheless, I do think Trey Ford keeps Edmonton competitive. And in this game, I'll take the 5.5 points with Edmonton here, and I'll also take over 51. Remember, Trey Ford, when he started in Saskatchewan last year, the score was 36-27 Elks. 63 points scored in that game. I think we can get over 51 here when it comes to the Elks and the Riders on Saturday night. All right, the final game of Week 9 in the CFL, Sunday Night Football. We only have a few more weeks. Well, I think probably 4 or 5 more weeks of Sunday Night Football, which, of course, comes to an end once the NFL season begins. But it's nice to have Sunday Night CFL through the summer months. And this week, the Sunday Nighter is Toronto-Calgary. Calgary Stampeders, 4-point home favorites, 49.5 the total in this game. There's been some big movement in this game. This opened Calgary 1.5-point home favorites. It's all the way up to 4. And I think there's good reason for it. We know Toronto is not playing great football as of late. They're only 2-4 in their last 6. They lost at home to Montreal. Cam Dukes didn't play well. They lost it at Saskatchewan. Cam Dukes really didn't play well. They beat Montreal 37-18. The offense in Cam Dukes was better, but remember, that's the game Cody Fajardo got injured. Caleb Evans took over. He struggled. And, of course, he struggled against Saskatchewan after that, which led to Davis Alexander taking over. So take that win with a grain of salt at Montreal. Very impressive. To go to Montreal, beat the champs, very good. But there were a lot of extenuating circumstances negatively for Montreal that really helped Toronto in that game, without a doubt. And then at Hamilton, 27-24 loss. Turnovers plagued them. Not great defensively. Again, not a great game from Cam Dukes, who got replaced in the fourth quarter by Nick Arbuckle, who kind of led Toronto to a near comeback against Hamilton. And then a 16-14 win against Winnipeg that it almost felt like Toronto lost that game because they did not play well at all, especially on offense. Winnipeg just shot themselves in the foot. Turnovers, blunders, not kicking the field goal late. And Toronto stole one from Winnipeg in that game. Now they're going on the road to face a Calgary team that, look, I know they were horrible last week. Awful. 33-6. And I liked Ottawa in that game. I said it on the show last week, but I thought it would be competitive. I thought it would be a close game, but it was not. It was a terrible performance, really, in all three phases. Drew Brown lit up the Calgary secondary. The Jake Mayer was terrible. Too many sacks. Not good enough. 6 points. That's just a horrible offensive showing. Dedrick Mills couldn't get anything going running the football for Calgary. It was a miserable game, really, for the Calgary Stampeders. But we have seen some really, really significant home road dichotomy start to show up here for Calgary this season, where they've been terrible on the road, 0-4 now on the road. But they are 3-0 here at home, undefeated here at McMahon Stadium in Calgary. And you look at the home wins. Hamilton, the first game, Winnipeg in overtime after that, and then probably their best win of the season against BC, 25-24 on the Wally Buono night, and they outplayed BC. They actually deserved to win that game. That was not a fraudulent score. They beat a very good BC team on this field. So you got Calgary off a loss, back home where they've played their best football. They're undefeated. You can understand why there was interest in Calgary -1.5 and why they've been bet up, especially with Toronto looking like they're vulnerable right now, and kind of a phony win for the Argos last week against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So I'm part of the brigade, if you will, that jumped on Calgary early in the week. I got -140 with them on the money line. That price is long gone. It's all the way up to about -190 or so now with the Calgary Stampeders on the money line. The point spread up to 4 in most places, 49.5 the total. I'm just going to buy into Calgary's home success, and we've seen it all season from Calgary. They've played good football at McMahon Stadium. They should be focused. There should be intent here for Calgary after an absolute embarrassing effort last week against Ottawa for them to bounce back here on Sunday night. And you just hope you get the good Jake Mayer. Jake Mayer's not as good as he played against BC, and he was very good in that game. And even though he was terrible last week, he's probably not that bad either. And for the most part, his good performances have been at home. I'm looking at Jake Mayer this year. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 80% completions against Hamilton at home. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 65% completions home against Winnipeg. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 307 passing yards, 78% completions against BC. And then you look at his road numbers, and they haven't been as good. So he's kind of gone as the Calgary Stampeders' entire team has, where he's played better at home, Jake Mayer, at quarterback, and not played as well on the road. You could say the numbers starting to creep a little bit now, starting to get up there a little bit, but I don't think I could back Toronto here on the road. They haven't been great on the road. They're 1-2 on the road this season. They lost at Hamilton on the road, which tells you all you need to know. They lost at Saskatchewan. And again, the Montreal road win does look impressive, but everything was falling apart. They suffered a shit ton of injuries in that football game, Montreal, including to Cody Fajardo, and it was a very short-handed team when that game got into the second half, and Toronto took advantage of that. I think Calgary responds with a better game here. I like Calgary. I still think they're worth a bet here at -4. But certainly you've missed the best of the number currently with the Stampeders. Does hurt that Clark Barnes, I believe, is not going to, at least last week he didn't play, and I think that hurt Calgary too. Because I know they've still got Reggie Bagleton, Markin Michelle, Jalen Philpott, Cole Tucker. I mean, they've still got some options there at receive, Cam Eccles, but Clark Barnes, the last few weeks prior to the Ottawa game, had really become a preferred target, someone that Jake Mayer was really starting to develop chemistry with. We'll have to see if he's able to return here from injury for this game for the Calgary Stampeders, because he was a late scratch last week against Ottawa, and you could tell they missed him in that receiving core. And it definitely hurt the offense a little bit. So we'll have to see if he's able to return. The offensive line's going to have to play better than it did. You can't give that is a concern here. Toronto's defensive front can get after the quarterback. And we just saw Calgary give up 3 sacks against Ottawa last week. Mayer was sacked 3 times. That is still a matchup concern, that Toronto's defensive line, takes advantage of a Calgary O-line that is still very inconsistent. But you also look back to the last time that Calgary was at home against BC, and other than 2 sacks from Sione Tuhema for the Lions, they did a pretty good job in that game of keeping a clean pocket for Jake Mayer. So maybe just getting back on the home field can elicit, a better performance from Calgary's O-line and the Stampeders team as a whole overall. Totals. This is another one where, as far as the total, I don't love the totals on this card this week. I don't know. Toronto's offense, who's going to start at quarterback? That I'm interested in. We've seen Cameron Dukes and Nick Arbuckle play in each of the last two games against Hamilton and Winnipeg. And Arbuckle actually looked pretty good at the end of the Hamilton game. He did not look good last week against Winnipeg. He was just as ineffective as Cameron Dukes was early in the game, and as ineffective as Cameron Dukes looked against Hamilton as well the week before. So Cameron Dukes is struggling. Do you go back to him one more time? Or do you give Nick Arbuckle another shot? But it's not like he was all that good against Winnipeg last week. What is so bad? My question is, what is so bad about giving Brian Scott a chance? I remember Brian Scott came into the game at quarterback for Toronto when they were beaten at home by Montreal. They were down big. And I know it was late in the game, prevent defense, but Brian Scott just went bing, bang, boom, right down the field and scored a touchdown. Why don't we give him a chance? If I'm Ryan Dinwiddie, I consider it. We know Cameron Dukes has really started to hit a wall. We know has Nick Arbuckle ever, at any point in his career, looked like a fucking number one CFL starting quarterback? I think we've seen enough Nick Arbuckle to know that he's not. So what is the problem with giving Brian Scott a chance to be the starting quarterback, at least for this game? I would make that move if I'm Ryan Dinwiddie. I don't know if he will. It's very early in the week still. This game's not till Sunday night. But if I'm him, I consider Brian Scott, because it can't be any worse than what we've seen at the quarterback position the last 2 weeks from this Toronto Argonauts team. All right, there you go. That is the Week 9 CFL card. We hope everyone enjoyed this edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, the CFL Week 9 edition of the show. Hit the like button. This channel will continue to roll out NFL and college football season preview videos. Every NFL division, every college football conference will be previewed, and we'll begin posting those later this week and next week as well. We'll get you ready for the NFL and college football season with that. All right, best bet for Week 9 here in the CFL. I'm going to go with my best bet's probably early in the week. BC would be BC or Calgary, but both of those numbers have moved. I don't want to give you them as a best bet now. The numbers have moved. I'm going to go to Edmonton, Saskatchewan, and I'm going to go Edmonton plus 5.5. I believe in Trey Ford. I do. I think this is a close game, and I think he's good enough to keep this game close. Edmonton Elks plus 5.5. It was either going to be that or the over in this game for my best bet. I'll go with the Edmonton side. Plus 5.5 against Saskatchewan. Trey Ford beat him on this field last year, Saskatchewan, and I think he has them close this year. Plus 5.5, Edmonton Elks. New life with Trey Ford at quarterback. That is going to be my best bet for CFL Week 9. And that is a wrap for this edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Thanks to everyone for joining me. Hit the like button on the way out if you haven't done so already. And again, we're here with you every week throughout the CFL season. And again, we will be adding weekly NFL and weekly college football editions of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy once we get into late August and September. So once we get into September and NFL Week 1 rolls around, there is going to be 3 episodes of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy every single week. There'll be a CFL show, an NFL show, and a college football show. So I am looking forward to that for sure. We are going to have in some capacity hitting the books the college football show that I have done for the last few years with my right-hand man, Connor Mack. That will return, and that will be on Mondays throughout the college football season like it's been the last few years. So we'll have some details on that in the not-too-distant future. So again, thank you for tuning in. And again, with the subscriptions, by the way, I should mention that before we wrap it up. 6 months all sports discount $400 down to $250 US. Tomorrow, Thursday, August the 1st, is the day where I release my NFL and college football season win totals and futures betting report. Every wager, the complete report, is exclusively available at Dub Club, which is why this 6 months all sports discount subscription option is the best on the board right now. $250 US, $150 off the regular price. It'll have you covered all the way pretty much through to the end of January. NFL, college football, which was a combined 22.2 units last year, NFL and college football for me combined. You'll get the report as part of that. Make sure you get on board. 6 months all sports, $400 down to $250 US. The report comes out Thursday. Looking forward to that. The other options at Dub Club: 1 month, the regular price, all sports, $75. 3 months, all sports, regular price, $200. And 1 year, all sports, regular price, $750. If you want a more selective approach, best bets, top plays only in all sports on a daily basis, and you don't want the high volume full card that you get daily at Dub Club, then SoBet is the subscription option for you. $9.95 per month. And again, at SoBet, you get my best bets and top plays only, a shorter scaled card on a daily basis. When it comes to the NFL and college football season win totals and futures betting report at SoBet, only the best bets will be posted from that report. So again, that is available as well for another more affordable option, and it's one for people that just prefer a lower volume of wagers on a daily basis. Best bets, top plays only in all sports, $9.95 per month at SoBet. And by the way, we've been profitable 7 of the last 11 days at SoBet as well. So looking forward to keeping that great run going moving into the month of August. All right, and with that, that is a wrap. Thank you for joining me for another edition of the show. I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy CFL Week 9, and good luck with your wagers. And we'll be back with you next week for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.